Tensiomyography, I don't know if you heard about it or not. It's a measuring method which will give you information about the skeletal muscle contractile properties. So it's not here to replace any of other existing methods that are already used. So you have isokinetic devices, you have EMG, you have different tests that will also give you information about how your muscles work. But as you will see from the results, tensiomyography will give you, one additional information which is quite unique to this method. So to simplify everything, it will give you information about the speed of muscle contraction. So not how fast that the person moves, but actually how isolated muscle, how fast can it contract. So this is one part of the information which we think is the most valuable one. And the second information that you get information about muscle tonus or muscle stiffness. So what is the tension in the muscle that you're measuring? The method is used so far in 3 different areas. So maybe the first area that was the one that accepted the TMG was the sport. Okay, let's see how the tensiomyography actually works. It's a very easy method actually, as you will see. The measurement is always, so it's not a performance test where the athlete has to be active. The athlete is always measured in a controlled environment. So we are using the standardized positions in which the subjects are during the measurement. Also, the measurement protocol is always the same, as you will see. So in this display here, the biceps brachii muscle is being measured. So in order to have standardized and repeatable conditions, the electrical stimulation is used to evoke the muscle contraction. So it's not a screening of the muscle activity during the voluntary movement. What you do is you use 1 millisecond long impulse to evoke muscle twitch, and with the displacement sensor, which is placed on the muscle belly, you monitor the response of the muscle. So you will monitor this twitch that actually occurs because of the electrical stimulation. And the result that we get is time displacement curve that looks like this. Of course, different muscles will have slightly different shapes of these curves, but nevertheless, always 5 parameters are followed. The contraction time is the parameter that monitors how long does the muscle need to reach peak contraction. So to reach peak power, to say it in other words. This parameter is the one that I already mentioned. It has very high correlation with actual muscle composition. So that means that the shorter the time that the muscle will need to reach peak contraction, more fast twitch fiber this muscle will have. So predominantly fast twitch fibers and vice versa. This is one of the reasons why contraction time is very important. The second reason is it's very sensitive. So unlike the delay time, the contraction time will change if the properties of the muscle will change. So what you can detect with the contraction time, you can detect potentiation that will occur after activating the muscle, after warming up, for example. It will detect muscle fatigue, local muscle fatigue immediately after certain activity. It will change drastically immediately after an injury. So if you have a muscle injury, this contraction time will prolong. It depends on the grade, and it depends on how long after the injury you are doing the measurements. But within a couple of hours or 1 day, you can expect this. If you have a severe muscle injury, the contraction time can prolong 100% or even more. So it's a drastic change. So these are acute changes, but on the other hand, you can also monitor chronic changes. That means that you can monitor the effect of the training program that you have. So if you're doing the measurements today and again in two months, so let's say in the beginning of preparation period and at the end, you can see if the muscles actually became quicker, or sometimes because of the fatigue that was built up during the preparation phase, they can also become slower. You can see how the properties are affected by different seasons in soccer, for example. So it can be used also to monitor chronic changes to see if the training program that you prescribed was effective or not, or if it went into the right direction or not. So this contraction time is one of the two parameters, that's why it's also highlighted here in red, that are closely monitored when you get the results of the measurements. Displacement is measured in millimeters, and this parameter will tell you what's the difference between relaxed and contracted muscles. So it will tell you the amplitude of the movement of the muscle belly during the contraction. And this parameter cannot be compared between different muscles because the main factor which will influence the amplitude is obviously volume of the muscle that you're measuring and shape of the muscle. So if you're measuring the big muscle like gluteus, for example, when the muscle contracts, it will produce a big movement of the muscle belly. If you're measuring a small muscle like tibialis anterior, for example, with very small diameter, you would expect some small movement. So to compare these two numbers wouldn't have much of sense. But the other factor which will influence this displacement is muscle tonus, muscle stiffness, muscle tension. And from that point of view, it shouldn't be, so the tension in the muscle shouldn't be too high and it shouldn't be too low. It should be optimal. And what is optimal, it's find out only when you have enough measurements from, so if you measure a certain subject, what you will do, you will always compare that subject to the same group of people. So, for example, if you're measuring a soccer player which plays defense, you will compare that data to soccer player which played defense. And of course, you take the same gender and you take the same age group as well. So in that case, you will, as a feedback, you will see if the muscle that you're measuring is hypotoned or hypertoned. So if the tonus is too high or too low. So this is when you compare the muscle to some external data, but it is much more important to compare the muscles within your own body. So in order to have, let's say, a physique which is prepared to take the maximum stress and be efficient in movement, you will also have to have the muscles which are very symmetric within your own body. So when you're measuring a muscle, especially a muscle that will, let's say, go from pelvis, like the biceps femoris, the rectus femoris, and you will see a big difference in amplitude, that will tell you that you have a different tension between left and right side. And with this information, what you have to do is you have to look at the big picture. You have to find the reason why, because sometimes the people have some issues that they're not aware of. So you can have the position of the pelvis which is not optimal. It can be tilted, rotated. That will create different tension front and back. So the hamstrings or the rectus femoris muscle can be under a different tension. This can affect maybe just performance. It can affect the movement pattern, but sometimes it can also lead to injury. And this is just, something that can help you to get some more data from the other methods and to look at the subject from different perspectives to see if there's something that you can do to get rid of the reason why this happened. And I will also tell you how you can work on the problem with a certain interventions that are usually recommended after the measurement. So, like contraction time, displacement is also very sensitive. So, within minutes, I can do something, or the subject can do something that will influence that, so it can give you the acute changes. Again, when you have some potentiation, the displacement will increase a little bit. When you have a muscle fatigue, when the fast-twitch muscle fibers will be too tired to participate in contraction, the displacement will drop. If you have an injury because of the inhibition after an injury, displacement will drop. So it's very, very sensitive. And like I said already for the contraction time, displacement can also show you the chronic changes. So it can tell you if the tonus of the muscle is changed because of you put too much stress on a certain muscle group during the training program or not. So to sum up this, what will follow closely is contraction time and displacement. So everything that happens up to this moment here, it's very interesting. What happens after that, it's a little bit less. I won't say it's completely unimportant, but it's a little bit less important than the first part of the curve.